Hi, I'm Vikrant Karnik. I'm the Global Cloud Services Leader at Genpact. And today I'm here with Jeffrey Hammond, who is the Vice President and Principal Analyst at Forrester. And we are here to discuss about cloud. Jeffrey, why don't you give us a little introduction about yourself?
Well, first of all, Vikram, thank you for having me. I've been with Forrester now for, geez, it seems forever, 14 years. And the past few, I've been looking at the way that companies and development teams are adopting cloud technology. Increasingly, we see that it's mainstream now, at least in terms of our numbers. In last year's Foresight's developer survey that we run every year, we saw that 44% of developers said that they were either regularly deploying virtual machines, containers, or functions to public clouds. So almost, half of all developers have now made this leap. But there are issues and challenges that those teams face as they make this leap, and so I get to hear those, especially from the managers in these organizations. One of the biggest ones that we see our clients struggling with right now is the question, well, how do I measure the value that I'm getting out of these cloud transformations? We've started migrating workloads. We've put our VMs on the public cloud. When do we start seeing the return on investment there? And it's interesting to have these inquiries because you kind of had to say, well, that's not really what going cloud native means. It's about the technology, but it's also about using that technology to unlock new opportunities from a business perspective, to align what the technology allows you to do with your business domain, to use the platform and service capabilities that these providers offer to reduce your own costs. So simply taking existing workloads and migrating them really doesn't deliver a lot. You've got to go beyond that. How does that square with what you're seeing?
Well, great insight, Jeffrey. With my clients, what I do see is often a lack of holistic approach, right? Looking across, trying to understand what business outcomes are you really trying to drive as part of your cloud transformation journey. And some customers are stuck in sort of saying, you know what, I want to refactor, I want to make my application landscape perfect before I move it to the cloud. That also creates all kinds of challenges and delays. The other thing I definitely would like to talk about is the challenging skills, right? One of the things which I see with my customers, a large entertainment customer, was, as they started migrating to cloud, a lot of their data landscape, the way data was being handled, real time streaming, as it moved to cloud was so different, and the skills and the challenges it created on their business people, on their IT people was phenomenal. And I don't think that people pay as much attention to the change which is driven as a result of moving to cloud. What do you think?
I'll give you an example of where I see that, VK. For a while, when containers started coming out and we started seeing folks talking about Kubernetes from a developer perspective, I was like, well, this is just the next generation of VMs, right? I mean, how's this different? And what you discover is, wow, there's a whole architecture and runtime model on top of this in terms of how you manage containers and how they scale and how you connect storage to them and all of those other things. And so if your developers are just thinking about this as, oh, it's just VMs, the next generation, guess what? They're really going to run into a brick wall when they try to take full advantage of the platform. So it pays to have folks that can make that leap conceptually, but then also are able to understand, all the YAML that they're going to be writing to figure out how to actually deploy these workloads into the container-based environments that are now really taking over in terms of how we think about running these workloads.
Absolutely. Maybe shifting gears a little bit, Jeffrey, I see customers, sort of looking at migration, modernization, and building even net new systems and models. What have you seen in your landscape?
Yeah, it really gets back to your point, from the earlier question about whether they have a cohesive or a holistic strategy. I did a survey last year where we asked about 100 cloud decision makers whether or not they had a strategy team with respect to what they were doing with the cloud, and it was actually split about 52-48. 52% said no, it was more of a project or team by team basis. Only 48 said that they kind of had a single cloud strategy team, and so as a result, what you see when there's a lack of a comprehensive strategy is it's what I would call a yes and approach to going cloud native. So folks migrate first, and maybe they modernize. They modernize in place. They build net new applications, and you end up with just a cacophony of technologies, and often some that overlap. Getting back to containers. I mean, there have to be at least 30 different Kubernetes services out there now. And if you don't have some kind of coordinated strategy, it's easy to end up with a half dozen in your organization, and they're not all the same. It would be like saying, hey, we've got a half dozen different relational database providers, and the SQL is all going to work the same across all of them, right? Yeah, of course. PL SQL, anybody? So unless you're a little bit intentional, you end up with technologies that aren't necessarily complementary. And that makes it harder to implement a cohesive business strategy when you are trying to integrate across multiple business units, across multiple projects. If you're trying to put some platform services in place that all of your organization can use. So, I certainly come down on the you need an overarching strategy side of that discussion, if for no other reason than to reduce the risk of cloud sprawl, which gets you back to this, well, why am I not saving any money now that I've started to migrate these workloads? Because you've got them running all over the place, So how does that square with what you're seeing at your clients?
That's by the way, the container example was very, very relevant. I actually have a customer who has a similar problem. He was asking me, what is the difference between ECS and EKS? I was like, well, that's going to take a little time.
Yeah.
But building on the migration modernization question, which we are talking about. See, I again see a lot of customers approach these journeys more from a sort of a technology outcome perspective. Like, hey, I'm in love with the tech, and hence that's what I'm going to try and modernize. And not enough importance is paid to, what process am I really trying to streamline? What business operations am I really trying to simplify? Is it going to generate, if I do all this modernization, is it going to generate extra revenue for me? Is it going to have some tremendous cost savings? And I often see customers struggle with sort of quantifying that benefit and using that as a lever to drive the journey of migration and modernization. What I do see, though, is customers who are building net new, and I have some examples, especially of an engineering customer who was like, hey, I'm trying to build a new business model, and it is all around how do I manage aftermarket supply parts. I want to build a really graduated cloud native service to attack that business because that is my differentiation. So I see a lot more business value being put when people are really building net new business models and anything else. But migration and modernization, I see the struggle. I see the struggle every day.
Yeah, I see that happening a lot in the open banking space. I mean, as banks are basically saying, well, what might happen if we open up our internal core business processes and build ecosystems around them? Can we drive more revenue because, we're there right at the auto dealer when somebody goes to apply for a loan, or we're there at the furniture store when somebody's making a purchase to put in their new house because we're all spending money on our homes because we can't go anywhere, right? And so this idea of being able to take your business processes and open them up with the technology assets at your disposal is key. I think a very large telecommunications service provider that in the process of modernizing their billing system decided they could start to offer billing services to third-party companies based on the work that they did, changed the way that they think about their technology base from a cost of doing business to an opportunity to develop new products and services and actually become a platform company, which, as we all know in the market, has some really powerful multipliers associated with it. If you're a platform company, it's a good place to be right now.
Yeah, yeah. So Jeffrey, do you think we have hit mainstream adoption around cloud? And if so, what are you seeing customers do to really prepare for that adoption?
Yeah, I like I like Winston Churchill's perspective on this. We're not at the beginning of the end, but we're perhaps at the end of the beginning. I think people get it. I think people understand the value. I think people know that they have to move. But I don't know what you see, but from a modernization perspective, there's still an awful lot of just hard blocking and tackling, which has to happen to break these systems up, to reduce the amount of dependencies in between the subsystems. And that work doesn't happen overnight. It happens a piece at a time. It happens from implementing patterns like the Strangler or creating API facades. And somebody's got to do that work. And tools can help a little bit, but it gets back to your comment about the skills. If you don't know how to take one of these things and break them apart and implement these patterns, it's really easy to spin your wheels and say, hey, okay, well, why aren't we getting business value from our migrations? Because you haven't done the hard work of beginning to loosen the coupling between these big, massive piles of technical debt.
Yeah, yeah, and talking about technical debt, my God, there is always and it was a conversation with one of my customers, which was a mix of business and IT leadership, and the business leadership was like, "What does that mean, and why is it needed?" And what struck me is, as we see a lot of mainstream adoption, right? We see cloud being widely adopted. I'm sure, as you mentioned, 45% workloads, right? But what I do see is a lot of the disconnect which happens between the business and tech leadership as the progression is going on, right? How am I measuring the ROI? Where is the incremental ROI coming from? And that for me, and the other part, and I'm working with a large pharmaceutical company who migrated, a significant amount of their workloads on one of the public cloud providers, and then are saying, why is it so expensive? Why is it so hard for me to get a control over where am I spending money on? So I think this emphasis on optimization and treating this as a journey rather than as a project which finishes at a certain point in time is absolutely critical. What do you think about that, Jeffrey?
I agree with that. And one industry that I see people getting it right now is retail. And one of the biggest reasons for that was because of the disruption that they had to go through. So I can think of one manufacturer that I spoke with that went from a world where the vast majority of their products were delivered and purchased in brick and mortar retail outlets to having to support an e-commerce capability almost overnight last year. And because they had made investments in cloud native technologies and had the ability to scale on demand, in their case, they had done a lot in the serverless space. When they had their second, Black Friday, which happened to be in April, they were able to adapt. And they were able to take advantage of that. And they were able to shift the channel mix for the products that they sold. That would not have happened if they were thinking about doing this, with some of their traditional cadences on top of their traditional technologies. They survived because of that flexibility. But there were folks that didn't do that. We had some folks in the travel and transportation market that, were looking at revenues dropping by, 80 and 90%. And they had these huge, expensive technology infrastructures to maintain. And basically, because of that, we're in survival only mode. We're canceling all of our new projects and we're not moving forward. And, if you've got a couple companies in an industry that are able to do the scale on demand and a couple of folks that can't do the scale on demand, when we emerge from these sorts of disruptions, you may not still be in business anymore. And so to me, I think that part of moving to that mainstream is starting to ask the question, where do we need to be able to grow and shrink our business on a moment's notice? Where do we need to be able to seize opportunity? One survey that I did last year basically showed that I think something like 76% of employees felt that their ability to introduce new innovations and products rapidly was going to be one of the things that was going to determine their company's success in the future. If it takes you 12 weeks to stand up the infrastructure to run a smart product or have it connect into, how are you going to meet that? How are you going to make that happen? And so this idea of cloud technology supporting a higher velocity business, if you have the business processes and the people that are aligned, is something that I think is determining the winners and losers as we go into pandemic year 2.
Very valid point. And just similar to the travel insurance example, actually, I'll talk a little bit about one of the products that Genpact actually has, and the business that we are in, which is which we suddenly saw an uptick on, because a lot, and this is all around pharmacovigilance, right? So this is when a drug company actually does in this case, a virus vaccine trial, so we saw a lot of our pharmaceutical companies start a lot of trials, but they didn't have the infrastructure to handle that, the people, the infrastructure which you would need to do all the adverse event monitoring. So they turned to us because we have a product, we have a service, a BPaaS service around that, all built on cloud, right? All built cloud native. And because we were using AI, the volume that we were able to ingest in, handle from a trial perspective, to the point you made, we were able to graduate it up, right? And to the point you were making, we could react to that market, we could help that market, we could capture that market. And that, frankly, you're absolutely right, is going to determine, who's a winner or a loser in that space. But very intriguing conversation, Jeffrey. One last question, with all the cloud sprawl, all the all the interest everybody's looking at doing, what are you seeing your customers do to sort of put their handle around clouds, control the cloud? What have you seen done, and what would you advise them?
Yeah, I think there's a couple things. First of all, from an organizational perspective, you have to think about how you're investing in new bets and how you're investing in optimizing your existing bets. And I think of a very large insurance company that we profiled a few years ago that basically started to shift toward the idea of team-based budgeting instead of project-based budgeting. And the reason for that was it was more important to keep the team together, to keep the skills together, to keep the knowledge together, and then apply them to solve problems. And so when those teams delivered value and they met their business value objectives, they got moved on to the next thing to drive business value, as opposed to the don't kill the job mentality that so many project-based budgeting cycles invest in. I think another thing that I'm seeing is the rise of what I call the platform plus product organizational model, where you have a core IT organization or technology organization that creates platform services that are made available for multiple business units, multiple product teams to take advantage of. The value of that is that you don't have every business unit try to figure out what's our cloud storage strategy. They don't try to figure out what's our container strategy. Should we be using containers or functions? Who are we going to deploy all this stuff on? The core platform makes services available, and so it essentially becomes the lifeblood of that company and allows them to focus on solving the business problem associated with the product or service, as opposed to all the technology problems associated with taking full advantage of the cloud. So, I can think of a dozen clients that have gone through that sort of platform plus products type of model. Often what they will do is they will build their products on top of a public cloud provider or maybe an OpenShift or something like that. But they are focused on creating the services, the capabilities, and the common capabilities that the organization needs to focus on solving business problems.
Okay. Just to add on to that, you're absolutely right about the Productless platform. I see that quite often. Actually, I see that more with banking capital markets customers. They sort of a little bit more mature in sort of thinking, hey, let me put a platform in place that other people can drive value from. And I know there's a large investment management firm which is deploying their strategy. We're helping them with that piece. What struck me was the connection between the 2 points you raised. right? Because as you switch from being project-based to product-based, and there's a customer we are working with where we are helping them change. We have a transformation office which we are helping them change through this whole process of, if you want to be truly product-based, having feature teams which run all the way through, how do you even change your IT budgeting cycle? How do you fund for projects? Because all of those things, in enterprise space is all geared to be very project driven. You're given funds for projects. You're not given funds for running products, teams. And that connected to the Productless platform is such an important feature, because you can't run the Productless platform strategy if you're funded by projects, right?
Absolutely right. We've written about that. We've focused on what we call agile financial planning. I think of a different insurance company that we profiled, that when they first started doing this, they broke their budget out. Okay, we're going to do 65% in our traditional budgeting scheme. We're going to apply 30% to team-based budgeting, and we're going to do 5% to our innovation team. And then the goal is to slowly tip that needle between the 65-30% so that it gets reversed over the course of about 5 years. And one of the things that a cloud strategy can do is help you accelerate the tipping of that strategy, because if you can start to take infrastructure costs out of the 65%, either through migration or by moving to consumption-based billing, those sorts of things, it frees that money up so that you can reallocate it to the new funding model that actually then acts as a force multiplier for your skills model, which then gives you the people to take advantage of the cloud technology. And it essentially becomes a virtuous cycle of improvement. I think that's how you get to a positive cloud ROI, by doing all of that sort of thing and building, piece by piece on each of those activities.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. First of all, I thoroughly enjoyed the conversation, Jeffrey. Just from a recap perspective, right? And we talked about so many different topics. I really enjoyed the conversation. But cloud. One thing which I will take away from our conversation, and also what I've seen with our customers, is cloud is an enabler for transformation, right? It's not the transformation. And if it is not used effectively to drive, transformation is when you achieve business outcomes, when that business benefit is realized, and cloud just happens to be an enabler to that. And by the way, it's not standalone. You need to change your people, your skills. You need to change your processes. You need to change, how you use technology. So it's not just one little thing, but also it is a multi-threaded journey that our customers have to go through.
It's absolutely right, because it reduces the barriers to entry of modern technology. So as a developer, I don't have to go wait 12 weeks for the sourcing and procurement department to approve my request for a server. I can go start working with Lambdas or Azure Functions or AKS right away. And, I can even maybe expense it in through my expense reporting process if I'm doing some early prototyping, right? So it removes the impedances from a team that wants to move fast. But that team has to want to move fast. That team has to know how to move fast. That team has to, have a vision that's shared with the business people that know what value that we want to drive. And so if those other pieces are in place, the skills, the focus on business outcomes, the holistic approach, then yeah, cloud can change the way that they work. But they all have to be there for success.
Right. Well, again, Jeffrey, I really enjoyed the conversation. Thank you very much. Thanks for being here with us today. Thanks a lot.
Hey, anytime, VK. It's always a pleasure.